much, everybody, for coming today. I really appreciate also your flexibility with the podium. I'm not the most important person to see here, so hopefully everybody else can see our exciting panel. So I wanted to kick off today and just recognize how tongue-in-cheek the title of this session is, because we certainly aren't standing up here saying that tech will save the world. But we are hoping to kind of shine light on the opportunity to address some of the world's biggest challenges: climate and sustainability, social justice, care, healthcare, and really shining a light on how the power of XR can really make a unique impact in these areas. So I will just introduce myself, and then we're going to go through a few videos of our panelists and allow them to introduce themselves. Jessica Lindl, I run impact and sustainability at Unity Technologies. For those of you who aren't familiar with Unity, our platform is really provides an opportunity for anybody to create and tell their stories and share them with broad audiences around the world in XR, 2D, as well as other mediums, mobile, console, et cetera. I have the unique pleasure of running our future creator work, so all of our education work, as well as our climate and sustainability and social impact work. One of the key programs that we run is Unity for Humanity, which is really trying to support changemakers who use the power of the Unity platform to make a difference in the world. And so these panelists have all been people we've supported. And I just want to give a shout out. Again, within tech, it's really hard to find a panelist of all women, so I'm really excited to be able to host this today. All right, so ideally, our tech works here, and we'll see a video. There we go. So cool. All right, Daria, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us about DressX?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. So basically, my name is Daria Shapovalova, and I'm the founder and CEO of the company, the video which you just saw. And we definitely use 3D to solve a couple of important problems that exist in the fashion industry, especially kind of the big issue of overproduction of clothing. So we believe that so many items, they can just exist in digital and never be produced in reality. And it just makes so much sense because you can wear them online, as you have seen in the video. And that's exactly what our customers are doing on the daily basis, and posting those images, wearing the digital clothes online, on social media and beyond. Obviously, we work a lot with gaming, various avatar platforms, but I do believe that we're kind of an avatars of ourselves when we are on social media. So that's why we kind of started this notion. We're the first company to think about that and implement. So yeah, that's a little bit about ourselves and DressX. But I'm happy to tell more.
Excellent, thank you. Really want some of those outfits for my next back-to-back day of Zoom calls.
For sure.
All right, we'll see the next one. I feel like they're cheering for your video.
I'll take it.
Caitlin, do you want to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. I'm Caitlin. I'm a creative producer, and at Scatter, I lead business development for our software tool called DepthKit, which is a solution to create your own volumetric video. So, Scatter, we use that tool on our own creative productions. We create stories, new ways of telling stories about the world around us, and then it's a tool that also used by creators around the world on their own projects. For any range of applications that you can think of, bringing sort of real people into 3D environments. And so the project that you saw there was, it's our latest installation that we've just opened this week at a museum in New York, where folks can enter the museum and have themselves captured as volumetric video and tell their own story about how this period since the pandemic has affected their lives, and we're kind of going to curate these stories into a collective landscape that these stories will be archived.
Amazing, thank you. All right, and next up.
Embodied Labs is fostering meaningful change in the way we care for our elders.
To be able to see what they go through or to see what they see, it definitely gives you a different perspective on how you would treat them.
How do we communicate the most common experiences that elders are going through? How do we frame those experiences within an immersive first-person narrative so that caregivers can gain insight and transform the way that they care?
There are people who are natural-born caregivers, but that's a minority of the population. Everybody else, especially myself, can use a little bit of guidance and expert training. So this puts us on a new plane. It's exciting.
That 15 minutes has probably been more moving for the student, giving them more lived knowledge about what their older adult patients will go through that have macular degeneration and hearing loss than anything I could ever teach in the classroom.
All right, Carrie, tell us more about you and Embodied Labs.
Sure. Hey everyone, great to see you out there. My name is Carrie Shaw. I'm the CEO and founder of Embodied Labs, and my background is first as a public health educator. I have a real passion for global public health, and then later was trained in medical visualization, so the people who drew illustrations in textbooks to now visualizing all health in immersive and visual ways today. And Embodied Labs is really a company that formed out of the intersection of my background and then my personal experience in my teens and 20s as a caregiver for my mom, who was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease in her 40s. So Embodied Labs is here to leverage immersive to inform us as caregivers for those that need it in our country and the globe, and we leverage all sorts of ways of immersion, from virtual reality to web immersive, like we'll focus on for this panel today.
Thanks so much for sharing that. That was actually going to be my first question, was just why you chose this area of impact, and it sounds like your mom was a key part of that.
To your point, Jessica, I brought a super high-tech wearable, but it was like first prototype for me, and just was a pair of glasses that illustrated what my mom saw. She had a visual deficit that was like really complicated and a mouthful, but if her caregivers could just put these on, and I could see what my mom could see, and so we could intuit, like, that's why we have to protect her left side or approach her from the right. And so it was this concept of stepping into my mom's perspective that gave me and her care team the ability to really meet her where she was and immediately transform our knowledge and our behaviors and our understanding to give her the care she needs. So that's what we've scaled more broadly now to things well beyond kind of this initial start that came from my personal story.
Oh, that's so impactful. Daria, what about you? Why did you choose fashion and sustainability, climate? Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking this question. So I'm originally from Ukraine, and I lived there for many years. I just moved 5 years ago to the United States. And actually, fashion was not developed when I started my career as an industry in Ukraine. So I really wanted to push that forward because all of my friends were like from creative industries and designers. So I started the largest fashion week in Eastern Europe. In Ukraine, it became the largest one after a few years. Yeah, and we pushed this creativity of Ukrainian designers and Eastern European designers forward. And actually, while creating that company, and obviously it was kind of a global case for the fashion industry at a scale, because especially in Europe. In the United States, Europe is too far. I think the majority of people in the United States just realize there is a country like Ukraine. But anyway, I mean, for the masses. And so we basically, when I was working with the designers, I actually understood that there are a couple of problems in the industry, as mentioned, that some of them overproduce, and some of them can't sustain actually their creativity because it's very expensive to produce in fashion. So I was thinking how we can marry that, and especially because I'm coming from a very kind of regular post-Soviet family, so I had not have a chance to purchase anything like expensive or something that I liked, and I always liked beautiful clothes. And I was like thinking how we can marry all of that and also give this possibility for everyone to access fashion anywhere in the world and not paying lots of money for that. And better to save it for the education or for anything else for kids, because I have a 9-year-old son whom I'm like bringing up myself. So that's why all these thoughts brought me to kind of digital fashion, that it can be a great answer, and especially because all the new innovations, they are born on the intersection of different industries, and especially tech and something else. So I was clearly person who knew something about fashion, and as I had 15 years of my career there as a journalist, and then as a person who started the Fashion Week, and then I did some other businesses. And that's what led us to DressX. And I also have a founding team members, and they have various backgrounds, but we all love fashion. Some of them are in tech, some of them were more on the business side of fashion. So yeah, and we sat around, it was the middle of pandemic, we understood now or never, because we already had this idea of what we can do in the fashion industry that will change it at a scale. And we thought, okay, when we don't know what the world will look like, and we just need to go and start the website where all the clothes wouldn't exist in reality. Why don't we do that now? Because no one can go outside, do any pictures, like shop anything, stores are closed. And that's how DressX was born, and actually we started to scale quite fast. And yes, and now obviously we're like one of the biggest companies in the space, and we have the largest catalog of digital fashion clothes in the world. So it's easy to choose anything. And in the DressX app, there are like Balenciaga and Fendi looks that are available for free to wear and create the content. So that's exactly how I envisioned that from the very beginning. And obviously sustainability is a big part. So basically other part of my team that today in United Nations, because we're presenting our sustainability research with the United Nations, as we partner with them a lot and with different other foundations. As actually first person that I've hired in the team was our Chief Sustainability Officer. So yeah, that's why it's a lot of angles at DressX, but that's a little bit about my personal journey and why I started the company.
It's an incredible
Like
story.
Wow.
And our thoughts continue to be with you.
Thank you
every
so
day.
much. Yes, thank
What's
you.
happening in Ukraine.
We donate a lot on behalf of DressX and our community. We actually created the Support Ukraine collection from the very first day of the war, and we already gathered 24,000 to support creatives in Ukraine, and then we did an NFT drop and get another 14,000. So it's like around $45,000 that keep coming from our community to donate and support creatives in Ukraine.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah.
Well, good to know.
Thank you.
And you have a broad selection of what you've chosen to support, too.
Yeah.
So how do you go through that process?
Yeah, I think for me, I grew up in quite a sheltered suburb in Pretoria, South Africa, and my window to the world was when I could go to the movie theater. So that's where I could become inspired about the big wide world out there and understand that there's more than the small existence that I had. And so I went to film school, wanting to be part of the movies, and started working in documentary production. And I guess I came to realize that there's very kind of traditional hierarchies established in that kind of film space for storytelling, which means that you often have a story that's defined by one director, and everyone else is kind of collaborating on that one person's vision. And that can be pretty limiting in terms of representation and the kinds of stories that get to be told. And so then I had the opportunity to start collaborating with creative technologists, and suddenly it was totally different, where everybody's ideas could come together and merge and become new, amazing things. And yeah, I think that's just become really exciting to me about like, what does that mean for who gets to tell stories, who are we telling stories for, and yeah, whose stories are we telling in the first place? And so, yeah, I've been excited about working in kind of the XR space and volumetric video, because these tools kind of open up the doorways to let people come in and collaborate and figure out how do we use these tools at all. And so that's kind of led me to where I am today.
Wonderful, thank you. Do any of you have personal stories, for example, in addition to your mother, where you've seen just the impact up close of the approach you've taken?
Myself, personal story about the approach, right?
About the impact,
The impact. I would say
there was a user.
Yeah, exactly. I remember, like, I started to remember all those stories, but before even I started the company, I remember I was having a lunch with a friend of mine who was in the fashion industry, and he came to Los Angeles for one day from Paris, and I was curious, why should you arrive to Los Angeles for one day from Paris? It's like takes so much time and effort. And he was like, he's from the fashion industry. They were shooting a cover of Vogue France, and he actually arrived to deliver the dress. And I thought it was insane, like how much CO2 was used on that flight to actually support him in delivering that dress for the fashion store. I was like, this is insane. I should change that. That shouldn't happen like that, because it's like a time of one person, and also like the CO2 and all the resources that are being used to deliver that dress to the fashion store just for like a couple of hours. So this is something, obviously it's not, it's like the first story that I've just remembered because it was very vivid. But there were more, but in any case, your personal story about your mom is fascinating, and thank you so much for sharing it. It's so meaningful.
Well, likewise, it's really, I think democratizing and accessibility is like comes through in all of our stories in the very different ways we're using the medium. And I think the key kind of impact that came to mind for me was this month, Embodied Labs and the U.S. Veterans Affairs Innovation Ecosystem are wrapping up an evidence-based 3-month pilot that we did across the national medical systems. And in honor of it being Pride Month, starting, I think, the 1st of, was that just yesterday? Are we already in June? Okay, June, Pride Month. Also, it's PTSD Awareness Month, and it was just Memorial Day. And what the U.S. Veterans Affairs is looking to do is leverage embodying perspectives of aging with dementia, but also embodying perspectives of LGBT older adults and really understanding their voices to train all of their staff that work across the medical system, and then also offer it as support and education resources to their community-based clinics that are all kind of how we support our aging veteran population here. So there's a few to pick from, but that one just popped into my head because of the timing.
That'll be really exciting to see. Are you going to release that report publicly too?
Yeah, we're going to have a white paper come out soon and be talking about the results from that study. So we're just really excited to finally have the data to talk about, like, from quantitative to metrics, like what knowledge did you gain, what behaviors did you change, how did your things like empathy are measurable, and so those are quantifiable, and then like marrying that to like qualitative things like how did this change your ability to do your job and bring compassion and care through these tools in ways that uniquely are solved by immersive and can't be solved in other ways or as well or as fast. And then marrying that too to just the voices, so we essentially create both immersive experiences and then the platform and tools to access them. And the immersive experience itself is something that always comes from the voices of who you embody. So it's just a really special process where we worked with older adults in the LGBT community to share their stories with our production team, and then let those stories lead the embodied experiences, and you really learn about these people that you are also then putting on a headset or using web immersive on your browser to really understand and connect to and apply forward in whatever way of care and service you're giving.
So your embodied stories that you use for training are based on real people and their real stories.
Yeah, it's like hundreds of voices of like, who is a person living with Lewy body dementia, or who is a person who comes from a culture of a Muslim background, and like what are her practices as they relate to her care. And we've really started in aging and caregiving as our first place to just test a vertical of like, how do we do this? Because there's just so many unknowns like you're sharing in your journey.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the scatter side, we normally start, with a story idea with, some kind of creative inspiration that we're trying to explore, something in the real world we're trying to represent. And then we let that inform how we develop our technology, our software tool, and let DepthKit, our volumetric video capture, kind of grow based on what it is we're trying to do with it. But then that tool is then made available to folks who are using it around the world, and that's, I think, where the real magic happens, because folks can really surprise us with what it is that they intend to create with it. And so recently, one of our creators in Denmark sent me a video of he had a 90-year-old grandfather, and he wanted to record some of the kind of anecdotes, life stories of the grandfather. And so he told these 4 stories and captured them as this hologram. And then fairly soon after that, his grandfather actually passed away. And at the memorial service for his grandfather, he'd created then an augmented reality app where those father's stories were then present. You could see him just as alive as before, but in this digital format, telling some of these really important moments in his life. And it acted as kind of a moment of remembrance for folks to kind of connect with, who this man was. So he described it as kind of a digital spiritual experience. And obviously that's not something that we had in mind when, developing this software. But I think that, it goes to show when you put tools into people's hands, it's up to their imagination what they're going to use it and the impact it can have.
Wow, that's really moving. I want to be able to do what he did with my parents. Yeah. That's such a great concept.
Yeah.
Too. How did all of you choose the technology medium? Because there's so many options to bring to life the impact that you were hoping to make.
Yeah, for me, volumetric video is kind of a necessary input, coming from like a 2D film world, embarking in this more XR immersive space. You need people to tell stories, you need characters in your stories, and there are limited tools in terms of how you bring people into 3D spaces. And so volumetric video is a way to bring real people as they actually are in an authentic way. As compared to any kind of 3D modeling tools where there's more of like a sort of rigged puppet style approach, and that can definitely be a valid approach in some creative contexts. But I think that what you can lose there is some of the authenticity and kind of feeling that this was a real person that was really present in a moment in time, and capturing them as they actually are, their own authentic movements, and letting folks' physicality represent itself in these spaces. And so volumetric video really is the only means to do that, to bring real people into 3D worlds as they actually are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I didn't know anything about the technology when I asked the question of like, how do I understand my mom better? And as I was in my Master's of Science in Medical Illustration, she was still alive, and I left home to go back to grad school, but was feeling like I just was wanting to stay connected with her story, and that really inspired some of the research that I did, and learned about this theory of embodied cognition, where you actually, your brain in an immersive space, or a web immersive, like a 3D on your browser, immersive and manipulative environment, it can be read as a real memory, and you create emotion and can accelerate like multiple times faster how you learn a similar kind of information that might be like in a PowerPoint. And so I was just fascinated that like this idea of embodied cognition and how it accelerates learning and it multiplies retention like 10x more than traditional methods. I was like, maybe this is like the way we can do something faster and answer questions we really have never been able to before. And I think one piece kind of is really fun because I was at this conference exactly 3 years ago, and we only had fully immersive, like VR-based experiences. And so shifting through the pandemic to offer 360 web immersive interactive training, it's not just a video. It's a whole format that creates like kind of like crayons and paint and all the tools you need in your toolbox, things like volumetric capture, like we bring them together and can then start mixing and matching and looking at scale, for example, where you don't need a headset to then access and have this accelerated impact, but both can really like complement each other and cycle up into lots of ways of getting meaning and impact. So I think what immersive in general as like a continuum of tools has just been, it continues to be something like volumetric capture that used to be so cost prohibitive could now become something we actually integrate into spaces like healthcare. And I'm so excited to continue
and any learning too. I mean, embodied cognition is kind of subject matter independent too, but I love how you've placed it in one of the greatest need areas we have. It's very aware of, especially during this pandemic too.
Right, yeah, more than ever. It's like in bad and, there's always silver linings, I guess. As an entrepreneur, you have to like be pretty,
Flexible.
Flexible is one way to put it. But as tragic as what we heard for what aging is like and where we heard things happening in nursing homes, I think there was a lot of stigma that was, I think is inaccurate for the industry, that was kind of media driven, and but also on the silver lining side gave us this awareness of like who our aging population is, and it's our largest and fastest growing group, and at the same time the people here to care are shrinking and there's a shortage. So things like immersive and technology really do have to come in and help solve like a gap between what is humanly possible and what we really need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Daria, what about you?
Yes, of course. So basically, for me, as mentioned, it was important to kind of create the company on the intersection of fashion and tech. And I started to think what set of technologies will help me to implement the vision. So first, we started with special photo dressing technology that we own. So when we can apply 3D items on the still images. So first we started manually, then we automated the technology. So we'll soon release in our product the opportunity to kind of wear as many times as possible the items and as many images as possible, because first we did it manually to understand the process, but then using ML, machine learning, we optimized that. But actually our company is using different set of technologies, because some of them with DressX, we're creating the content, so we're creating the items themselves, and we do work with lots of fashion brands and designers, but we also provide this utility for the digital fashion clothing. So first of all, you can wear them on the still images, so that the technology that we started with, and there is a lot of machine learning there, so we have a team of machine learning engineers building that and optimizing, but we also use augmented reality, and here we partner with Snap because they have amazing AR kit. And that's actually also some of my friends who are in the team who build that for Snap. So I kind of knew about the process, and augmented reality is something that I believe in a lot. But and we were one of the first companies in the world to partner with Snapchat on the camera kit. But now, obviously, we also use blockchain as one of the technologies that powers the use case of authenticity of some of our items, as we support both off-chain digital clothing and on-chain, which means that some of the collections for the designers, it's important to have scarcities. So we sell them as an NFTs, and that's why it's powered by blockchain. But what's important, like, we're not an NFT company, we're not augmented reality company, we're a digital fashion company that uses a set of different technologies to help us to scale and deliver the vision of digital closet, of your meta closet that you go to before you go online, before you show up online somewhere. And the Zoom call, for example, that will launch in Q3 of this year.
I was curious, just in what I've seen on your website and the video, the movement of the clothing. Like, how did you capture? How do you capture that in real time and have the clothing actually move with the...
Move with you. That's augmented reality.
Okay.
Yes, this is something like on the short videos. That's what our clients, users can do on a daily basis. It's very easily shareable on social media and beyond. But for the video calls, the use case I personally very much believe in, because we're all using our cameras on a daily basis. We're building that, and it's a combination of different tools. And yes, we're exploring some parts of Unity technology, and yes, and there is some of machine learning as well there. So basically, that's what we're going to release in Q3, Q4 of this year. And obviously, it will be more about digital accessories, but because we prefer to sit down on the call, so we're not standing up. As the majority of the looks we sell, they're body looks, but here it will be more about the accessories and like hats and something that you can wear on this part of your body. But which also looks cool, you know, it looks amazing when you're in a video call and you can start your conversation by complimenting your digital look. It's exactly like in the real life.
That's great. My last question, and then we'll open it up for Q&A from the audience. I was curious, all of you are bringing in community voices and community storytelling, and so how exactly do you do that and equip the community to tell their own stories and think through bringing that to life?
I'll jump in. I think of, I guess, like 3 layers of storytelling. So there's, you know, the person who's like telling the story. There's the person the story's about. Then there's the audience side of it. And I think all of those are entry points for community interaction. And not all projects can serve all communities, but I think it's useful to think of where there's room for that engagement. So the project that Scatter's installed at the Museum of the Moving Image fundamentally has a kind of community layer in what the story is. So the idea is that we're providing a virtual landscape and the tools for folks to show up in that landscape as, you know, digital versions of themselves, but allowing the community to drive what those stories are. I think that you know, throughout the pandemic, it's been, you know, everybody has gone through something, good or bad, and the idea is to just create a nexus point for people to actually have an opportunity to share those experiences and then collect all these experiences in a landscape that other people can then experience and explore and you know, witness all at once and kind of gather together. So I think we think of that as kind of a, you know, community collaborative storytelling. It's not to say that, you know, all stories should be told in this way, but I think that particularly because the pandemic has been something that we've all gone through collectively, we wanted to have a means to let us tell that story collectively instead of just a singular perspective on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about the process earlier of how the embodied experiences are created, and I think the add-on to that I'd say is that really comes through ways like we've used web immersive or web real-time 3D. There we go. We've been able to scale and have, you know, so imagine you each in the audience would want to join in from wherever you are on a browser with other caregivers who have similar shared experiences to you. These experiences that you're embodying, you actually go through together, and it creates community between you then so that you can have a faster conversation with someone who maybe also had a similar problem with like bathing in the shower, or like an experience with hallucinations or pieces of dementia that are just so hard to imagine, I guess. It's easier to remember than imagine, and it's easier to quickly connect with someone around a difficult experience when you can share a common language to jump off from. So the collective voices in the embodied experiences then become that language that we can use to talk to each other about our shared experiences, and that cycles up into that faster, accelerated ability for us to create in community with each other and as real humans, just in different spaces across the whole world, no matter where we are. So that's maybe a little more color, and I wish we had like and more time, but that's always the scarce resource, so
Yeah,
leave
so
it
it's
there.
really almost community-based storytelling in a way. It's like you do a collective approach
It's like a full circle.
to it.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Yes, obviously community is everything for us. It's a community-based company, I would say, because it's a community of designers. And I know that there were a lot of designers who actually were inspired by DressX to start their journey in 3D because they never thought that they can create fashion just digital only. And that was amazing breakthrough for them. And that's exactly the message that we tried to deliver, as I saw a lot of designers going bankrupt and they didn't know how to sustain that production, as mentioned in the beginning of the talk. And now you just can open your laptop and you can learn a set of tech and like some sort of software programs, and you will design your items and you can already start selling them without producing them in real life. But actually the community of digital fashion, let's say those people who love it and our users that are growing on a daily basis, and it's 150K users more or less that are using the product. And this number is growing too. But I think now, like, the most important investor in each of our companies is basically the community behind it, because they're supporting the company on a daily basis. And obviously, I'm always online for all of the venture investors that we have in a company, but actually, the majority of the efforts of the team is to support the community on all the social media and the community of people who are purchasing our looks and who use the product, because that's exactly our opportunity to deliver this message to the entire world, I would say, of those Gen Zs and millennials who are ready to start their digital wardrobes and to switch some of their consumption habits to digital only. And that's exactly what we're trying to achieve with the goal. So the big idea here is to sell 1 billion digital fashion items, whether they are NFTs, non-NFTs. We're close. Not there yet, but we'll see each other in a couple of years.
I like that line of the community is the most important investor.
That's for sure the truth of nowadays.
All right.
So every company.
I think we have a few minutes left for any questions that anybody has.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead. Here, let me give you the mic. Sure, I'll go first. I guess I got the mic first, right? Great panel. Carrie, this is my question for you. You know, there's a lot of us that are in like the sandwich generation right now, in our 40s. We've got our parents that are in our late 70s, 80s. And just kind of curious, you know, do you see the application of your company going beyond just like healthcare workers? Like, is that like the next user base for you? And what are you like thinking as far as like how the experience will evolve?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so when you think about embodying others to accelerate your lived experience, that concept can apply in a lot of different ways. And so I absolutely we have this vision to grow what Embodied Labs is today beyond where we've started initially with a focus on caregiving and now more just on quality of life. And how do we, for example, when we're equipping Best Buy, their health platform and team with our tools to train their customer service employees, they can then take that into product design and R&D, and they can take it into their stores and they can reach their customers. And so you start seeing this cross functionality of where you can scale up immersive for leveraging things that others need to access, and it goes much, much beyond where we've started today. And I think the industry as a whole it's still nascent. I mean, we've come a long way in 3 years, and we'll go like to the billion mark here in like another 1 or 2, right? So like as far as growth goes, like we're just getting started, and we're gonna see immersive shape its own category of what we'll see in like Fortune 500s and here in the next decade to come.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Actually, I'd love to talk to each of you independently on some of this. The empowerment of the communities are the important part, but I think we're fundamentally seeing a paradigm shift on the way the media is being used and the way we've traditionally done it. And Carrie, I'm actually very curious on the neurodivergency in particular of shared storytelling, and that gets all the way down to well, to all three of you, from fashion all the way into volumetric capturing. But how does the role of the individual story do you see evolving and switching? We've gone from a role of directorship into self-empowerment, into community growth. And each of your tools and each of your methods are definitely empowering this transformation. But how, I guess each of you could answer that independently. How do you see that shift happening, and how do you see yourself enabling that?
Yeah, we've gone from now being able to have a collective shared embodied story of lots of narratives to putting on a headset or being in our browser to experiencing that. And so we're like collectively experiencing someone else's story as an individual. And so we're coming back out of that experience now with like a memory and our own opinion and lived experience that pushes back on that collectivism. So I think it's like a push and pull of like, I just imagine kind of like a pottery wheel of like we're adding more medium in to be able to shape and build more. And literally in digital space, like this is space where we can build and grow and like make use of that in ways that are now possible because of where the technology has evolved.
Yeah, I think the technology can definitely kind of be something that levels the playing field, and just kind of changes the status quo so that you can have people coming with new ideas and converging in new ideas, and this kind of individualistic approach can be, just second guessed. We can. I think the technology just becomes a nexus for folks to collaborate and create together. It doesn't necessarily mean that the tech itself creates the community. It's the people that create the community. But I think that when you have something kind of new or disruptive, it lets people engage in a way that like a more traditional, established approach, those doors are already closed. So I think certainly the kind of XR space has flattened those walls.
Yeah, I would finish by saying that fashion is a language, and with the usage of technology, we can make it accessible to every person in the world, no matter where he or she is, and what his or her views are and the budgets are, because in digital fashion, it's all democratized. And that's why that's like the power of the community and the language that I think unites here, and that's what excites me so much. Because the traditional fashion industry where I was for 15 years, it did not give this opportunity for everyone to explore it. It was very centralized, and now it's our opportunity to decentralize the entire industry to make it accessible to everyone, and it's an amazing, amazing opportunity. And I'm super happy that there are a few companies that are working at this space, because I remember how like Net-a-Porter was started, Natalie Mastay, I know her personally as well, and some of other friends of mine who started online fashion retailers. If it was one company, they would never succeed, because people would never switch into purchasing luxury online. But because it was several companies at the same time, coming from different people, different concepts, that's exactly why the industry became so big, and all of them became successful. Majority, I mean.
Well, we can't wait to see where the three of you go next and support you along the way. Please join me in giving you a round of applause.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us today.